for the late changing of the schedule, but there's a lot going on in DFS today, and I wanted to get something in for all of this. So the early slate starts at about 12:10. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a lineup build for the early slate where I go over both my, where I think the best projected plays are and how I'm actually going to play them using the different tools available on SaberSim for you guys. And then I don't know if I'm going to log off and back on, or maybe I'll just stay here. I'm not sure, but I'm going to go into the main slate preview. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'll do two separate videos. This way, if people have no interest in the early slate, they can search for, the main slate video and they'll see it separately. And then after that, we will go, after that, we will go and do the golf preview for tomorrow. Now, again, Bobby's kind of all over the place today, so I don't know if he's going to be joining me for any of this. But in any case, I'm just going to go ahead and get started. All right. So again, let me share my screen first. And first we'll take a look at, again, it's going to be projections first, then we'll do a build. First, we'll look at, we're not going to do FanDuel early. We're just going to do DraftKings early. And then when we come back, we'll do both DraftKings main and FanDuel main. So as far as, well, hold on. Before I even get into this, I think it's a good idea to just get a little look-see at the weather. See if there's anything worth mentioning. Not really. Nothing really of note, except to say that it's really hot in New York. I don't think there's any games here, but boy, oh boy, is it hot. So if that were an issue, I would confirm that it is hot. So we're looking at this. Okay, so if the early slate, which let's just get moving. We have Tariq Skubal and Hunter Green. Well, more to the point, Tariq Skubal showing up as the top-rated guy. And then you'll see kind of a gap, and then it's literally four pitchers and nobody else. For whatever reason, Ranger Suarez is just not showing up as a good play for me, and that's fine. So it's Tariq Skubal followed by Green, Keller, Gibson, and Lopez. So if you were hand building, and you didn't care too much about ownership, whatever, you play Skubal with one of these two guys, and one of these four guys, and probably that would be your pairing. It's certainly not going to be particularly anything earth-shattering. People are going to have the same type of thing. But again, Skubal top, followed by Green and Keller, and then Gibson and I'd say Gibson and Lopez, sort of close either way. All right, let's take a look at the stacks. And again, this is by far the least interesting part of it. But let's look at the stacks as far as how they would project. Hold on. So it'll be DK Driver. Okay, here it is. Wait, no, those are the players. Let me get the stacks. It'll be dry. This is 1 second. MLB DK stacks early. Okay, here it is. All right, so if we're looking at these by just raw points, and that's what I'd like to look at first, you would see that two teams kind of stand out among the others, and they're both coming from the same game. So I imagine the wind is blowing out Chicago again. So these two are going to project the best from raw points, and as you can see, the raw ownership is probably very strong as well. I mean, pretty well owned. Let's take a look at the way these guys rank from other metrics. Let's look at just regular point per dollar stuff. And still, unfortunately, Chicago and San Francisco rate in the top 5 at least. But then you get Cincinnati as St. Louis as your next group. And that's important to just kind of keep in mind. And then we look at modified stack rating, and that is kind of like Sheets Value Score. It combines both regular raw fantasy points and point per dollar. Once again, it's Chicago and San Francisco standing out over everybody else. So whatever you run, that's what you're going to end up getting. Like if you want to play like a lineup that rates to do okay in the long run, you'll play Chicago, San Francisco. You'll probably game stack it if you want. Play 5 of one, 3 of the other, and Scooble with one of those pitchers, and you should be off to the races. Now, again, with GPPs, it's not so easy because of this ownership. So if you're hand building, what you'd probably do is go down to the first team that has low ownership that rates decently, and that's, I guess, would be Cincinnati. So Cincinnati, I guess, would be the top non-Chicago San Francisco stack that I would identify. And then I guess probably Pittsburgh would be next. So again, from a hand building perspective, that's all that I can, messages. Okay, let's go into SaberSim and let's just let SaberSim kind of help us here, because if I built this stuff by hand, I promise you I'd be doing the same thing as everybody else is. I would not be properly factoring in ownership or the contest that I was in. And that's why I like to use SaberSim for exactly these types of slates. And if SaberSim, through all the different settings and the things that I do to it, still give me Chicago and San Francisco, it's kind of a testament to probably how good of a play they are. And then you have to decide whether you want to play at all, honestly. So let's just take a look. We put the projections in here already, and let's rebuild the lineups. Now, again, we're going to build 5,000 lineups. And as we're building this, the questions that we really have to ask ourselves is the main question is, what field of lineups do we set to compare our lineups to in the contest simulation? Do we use the SaberSim kind of default lineup slate prediction, I guess is the best way to describe it? Or do we maybe use our 5,000 lineups that we are building as a representation of what the field is going to do? Or do you not use the contest sims at all, right? Well, let's just see what it would look like if we did not use the contest sims at all. I imagine it's going to be all San Francisco and Chicago, but we'll see. Whoa, look at that, Cincinnati right at the top of the list. Interesting. And then when you look at the team stacks, 84% Cincinnati. How about them apples, huh? The SaberSim is not particularly interested in the high ownership, I guess, in the Chicago, San Francisco side. So very, very interesting. I wonder, though, if this has something to do with the fact that this is the only game that does not have lineups released. I don't think so, because you know what? When you look at the pool exposure across all 5,000 lineups, San Francisco and Chicago rate number one. But when you just rate the top 50 using their default kind of like upside settings, you're really not getting too much of them, which is pretty interesting. So what I would do, if I in fact were going to go for this, I would make a couple of changes. Like I wouldn't want to have, well, let's just look at stack types for a minute. Yeah, let's get rid of the 4 2s. Let's just use only 5 2s and 5 3s. But what I'd be inclined to do is not limit myself to 86% Cincinnati, and see if I can get that kind of artificially lowered. Because we're already getting really aggressive going against Chicago / San Fran. So let's just see if we do min uniques like 2 or 3. If we can reduce some of those stacks. I prefer to not have it like manually say give me less than whatever. I'd like to do it sort of organically and see if you can just kind of like force it to be a little more diverse here. Like maybe like 56% Cincinnati. So this is one way to do this. Okay. Now this is not, of course, factoring in what tournament you're entering and all of that. Okay. But for now, let's put these in. Okay. let's just put these in all the tournaments. A couple of deuce, and we'll save these for now. And then we'll go back and we'll do the Sims, and let's see if using the Sims gets us a build that we sort of like, if that means anything. And again, this is unfortunately the reality here, is that not the reality. The big question is, do you use these tools to get you derivatives of lineups that you would want anyway, or do you let the tools kind of dictate what you want to do? In other words, like, instead of, there's two ways to look at this. Number one is, I don't want to have 80% of a team. So regardless of what SaberSim says, puts out, I'm going to manually reduce to 35% because that's my kind of predisposed bias of how much I should have of a team. Or we should question our biases and question our instincts and just let SaberSim with its, dispassionate algorithm just kind of roll for you. I wish I knew the answer. I'm a little more in the camp of kind of letting SaberSim roll than a lot of people are. Just because I have very little, faith in human beings and myself, as going with biases and things like that. Anyway, let's run Sims, and here is the question again that I have to ask: what field do we want to assign to the field? Like, what do we think the field is playing here? Like for the walk-off home run, if we could use the flagship 20 max, which is what SaberSim would want, or for example, we could just use build one and use our 5,000 lineups. And unfortunately, I don't exactly have the answer to that. But one thing you can do is sort of cheat, in that you look at these pool exposures that I mentioned before, and you see that San Francisco and Chicago in our pool rates to have all this ownership. And I think that this makes sense. So because of that, I just want to double check the pitchers and see if that sort of represents what I would think we would play. Let's see. Pool exposure for pitchers. If we used our builds, it'd be 40% this. So this looks about right. Okay. So because of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use actually build one to indicate the field of lineups that I want to compare ours to. So we're really comparing ours to ourselves, right? But that's okay. It's still just a question of getting leverage and things like that, and who's going to be lower owned and with upside and all that stuff. So let's run the Sims. And what am I hoping for? And again, this is the mind F. Okay. Am I hoping for a set of lineups that represent what I want to play, or am I hoping for something kooky? In some sense, if you use these tools to confirm your biases, maybe that's not kind of accurate. Maybe you should just let this thing kind of roll in spite of your biases or against your biases. So let's just see. Let's see at what would look like the relay throw. Okay, making no changes except for the stack exposures, which are we don't want any 4 zeros, we don't want any 3 2s. So if we just kind of ran this with nothing else, no min uniques problem, no anything, we'd be getting, using the Sims, a full 84% Chicago and 72% San Francisco, even using the Sims. So, again, this is where our biases come in. When we ran it without the Sims, we were getting basically none of these popular teams. And when you're running with the Sims, you're getting all the chalk. So you can look at this one of two ways. Number one, that if even running the Sims gets you so much of these teams, they're probably just stuff you shouldn't fade. Okay. But I don't know about any of this. This doesn't seem right, but let's just take a look. Let's take a look at the pitchers. Again, 80% Scooble, 48% Green. So we're not going to go with this. We're not going to go with this build because it's just too chalky for me. That's the best I can describe this. However, another thing you can do is you change these field settings back to the default of SaberSim, okay? Because it's possible that, again, if we're just comparing our 5,000 lineups, maybe that's not enough. Maybe that's not enough. So let's use theirs. We'll rerun the contest sims and see what kind of distribution that gives. See, kind of what I'm looking for, and again, you really shouldn't be looking for stuff, I don't think, when you run these things. But what I happen to be looking for right now is a build that does not get me too much Chicago and San Francisco, that is based on sims and based on my projections together. So far, I haven't found it. Let's just see. Let's go first to, not going to walk off home run first. Let's go back to relay throw, risk adjusted ROI. And now let's just see what it looks like now. So now using this set of field lineups, it's much different, right? Now we're getting back to this 88% Cincinnati business, 28% Pittsburgh, and then San Diego, and then almost nothing of Chicago, San Francisco. So this is what I'm interested in. And I guess why the different results? Okay. The different results is completely because of the fields of lineups I inputted. And I guess what it was that my 5,000 lineups probably gives too little to San Francisco and Pittsburgh, I guess. Okay. But that doesn't seem to make sense. I think that maybe that's true. I'm not sure why you get this discrepancy. But what I think I'm going to do is probably go with some derivative of this. But again, now we have the problem of Cincinnati being too owned. So we would go back in, go maybe min uniques 4 or something, see if we can't get this thing lower. And there we go. So 54% Cincinnati. I guess this makes a lot more sense. Okay. And then we go back to stack exposures. So we are going to go with that fade Chicago, San Francisco construct. But the only difference is that we're gonna use the version that's kind of predicated on the sims and not just the straight the straight Saber sim build. Okay. So what we have done, by the way, is essentially not particularly smart on this particular day, because as you've been following along, I've been trying to build a set of lineups that conform to what I wanted to do beforehand. And that's really not the best, I don't think. Is that approach going to be better? Here's the question, right? Is that approach going to be better than just screw it, let the algorithm tell me what to do, as opposed to telling the algorithm what I want it to tell me to do? And unfortunately, as I say to a lot of these problems, I don't have the answer. I continue to work through it every single day, and give and go through these different processes with different outcomes, if you want to know the truth. Okay. Any questions on any of that? Or any questions on anything? And you can even say, who do you like between this and this? But hopefully, as you see, and from my various videos, I know you don't want to hear this sometimes, but it's so much less important who you end up with than how you get there. Yeah. Okay. So that's going to do it. I'm going to get out of here, but I'll be back at 12, I guess. Yeah. I'll be back at 12 to do the main slate preview. Good luck.